Let's bring in Alexey Muraviev, who's an Associate Professor of National Security and Strategic Studies at Curtin University. He joins me live on the line from Perth in Australia. Welcome to you, sir. My first curiosity about this was, why did Russia decide to save Bashar al Assad? It seemed like he'd been useful to them, but he outlived his purpose and he was being removed from power. Why do you think they chose to bring him to Moscow?
Look, I think it's an act of symbolism, and as you can appreciate, symbolism is really important when it comes to Middle Eastern politics. By offering Bashar al Assad asylum in Russia, I think Putin sends a clear message to anyone who continues to support him by simply saying, I will look after you. You will be loyal to me. I will look after you. I will not abandon you. I will not betray you. I will provide you with personal guarantees. Clearly, Assad is lost to Russia in terms of being a heavyweight in Syria, a political heavyweight in Syria. But I think it's now beyond Assad. It's about sending a signal to other governments, friends of Russia across the Gulf region, in other parts of the world. But I won't be also ruling out completely a possibility that Assad and his future in Russia, because there is no guarantee that he will settle in Russia for good. Russia may be just a transit point for him, a temporary asylum for Assad and his family, maybe then used as a possible bargaining chip in negotiations between the Russian government and whoever will assume full authority and control over Syria.
Yeah, I've got to agree with that. But President Putin does like to send that message. If you cross Russia, you'll pay the price. If you're loyal to us, we'll be loyal to you. In terms of its assets within Syria, the naval base, the air base there, it sounds already as if Russia's negotiated the security of those assets with the opposition forces, which seems remarkable. So, I mean, does it suggest to you that there have been discussions going on behind the scenes before Assad was even removed?
Well, look, I mean, I would probably say there were conditional negotiations, because we need to remember, up until now, the Russian air forces, for example, were engaged in attacking advancing opposition forces. I think they were quite select in whom they were targeting. There would be forces that the Russians would consider to be approachable in terms of having political negotiations. There would be forces with which the Russians would probably not feel comfortable having any form of discussions, and that would obviously include Islamic extremists, for example. I also would not be 100% certain that the Russians have now fully negotiated the continuation of the leasing of those bases from the Syrian government, because we need to remember that 49-year-old lease was signed back in 2017. So the Russians obviously want to keep it going for the entirety of that agreement. But the Russians are not keen of leaving the bases. They invested literally billions and billions of rubles in building up those facilities, the naval base in Tartus and the air base in Khmeimim, a couple of other forward bases that I think the Russians perhaps no longer control, and they will stay there. They stay for as long as they can. They're willing to clearly defend the bases. They're willing to secure the perimeter. And we need to remember, the Russians have been working with the security and secret services, with intelligence services, with the Syrian military for a very long time. Even though these forces seem to now disappear or go underground, I don't think the Russians have lost any connection with them. And worst case scenario, the Russians may want to probably muscle them up down the track once the euphoria of a regime change would settle down. I think the Russians will have couple of surprises up their sleeves if they will not be able to negotiate a settlement, some sort of an outcome with the interim government. So I think we would need to consider that the Russian influence in Syria is not just going to disappear with the departure of Bashar al Assad.
It's not going to disappear, but the tide has changed, and there's going to be a new people, we don't know, but there's going to be new voices speaking in a position of power within Syria, and that creates the possibility, does it not, of new alliances? Could alliances change? May some other countries think this is an opportunity for us to gain more influence within Syria?
Without a doubt. I mean, and that's why I'm very cautious in sort of painting a very rosy picture that Russia has already done a deal and everything is settled down, etc. As we can appreciate, the landscape of the Syrian opposition is very complex. Some already are on knife's edge with each other. Up until now, they have been united by the idea of toppling the regime of Bashar al Assad. He's gone now. And there is no guarantee that these differences are not going to surface and create difficulties. So there is no clarity about who is going to be in charge of Syria. Is it going to be a coalition government? If it's going to be a coalition government, who will form this coalition? We need to remember forces that behind some of these rebel elements, and these forces, and I'm talking about external powers, are not going to sit quietly and see a serious transition without taking into account their own interests, and certainly Russia is one of those forces. We also need to recognize that, for example, Israel has already moved into the gray zone on Golan Heights and is taking active role in dismantling some of Syria's military infrastructure in fear that it may be used by radical Islamist forces. So there are too many layers in this smorgasbord that now can be attributed to Syria's political landscape. So we are very much in the gray zone. There are no definitive answers. There is no definitive clarity about the future of not only Russian forces. We need to remember there are elements of the US forces that are present in Syria, and that would not be a complete list. So I think there would be quite a few heads being scratched in capitals across the world in trying to make sense of what is happening in Syria and more about how Syria's political future will look like.
Love it. So many layers. I think that was a fantastic description of it. So many countries looking at potential opportunities there now in Syria. Great to speak to you. Alexey Muraviev, Associate Professor of National Security and Strategic Studies at Curtin University.
Thank you.